First, though, we're joined by our regular panel, Liberal MP Kelly O'Dwyer and Labor MP Nick Champion. A stark reminder of just how seriously we need to take these matters, Kelly, this morning.
Absolutely, Kieran. It is, I think, a very prescient reminder of just how serious the terrorism threat here in Australia actually is, and that this is not a problem that is simply an international problem, but it is one that concerns the security of our citizens here at home. This is the largest operation that has occurred between the Australian Federal Police, the New South Wales Police and also the Queensland Police. More than 600 officers are involved in this counter-terrorism action. It comes off the back of the fact that the national security threat has been raised too high, and it also comes off the back of the government increasing the resources to our counter-terrorism agencies by more than $630 million so that they have the ability to do their job in helping to protect our citizens.
Nick Champion, your thoughts on this? These raids that have come, as Kelly mentioned, less than a week after the official terror alert was elevated from medium to high.
Well, look, obviously I'd agree with Kelly. These are serious matters. I'm not sure that much can be gained at the moment from politicians commenting on them terribly much, but I think we should let the police and the agencies get on with doing their job, and they're obviously doing it well.
Nick Champion, thank you for that. Now, we're standing by to take you live to Washington. The US President Barack Obama has spoken overnight, seeking to clarify the military deployment there. As soon as that happens, we will take you to our reporter at the White House. But in the meantime, Kelly O'Dwyer, your thoughts on the debate around this deployment? Of course, it's linked to some degree because the allegations this morning of these counter-terrorism raids, some of the allegations, as we understand it, will include support for that organisation, which is the focus of our military deployment. The Prime Minister heading to Amberley later in the day to farewell our troops to the Middle East.
Well, we've been very clear on why we have become engaged in this international cooperative arrangement in Iraq, and that is because we want to play our part in ensuring that we can support the humanitarian mission that is going on over there. We have seen truly horrific acts on our daily televisions where we have seen beheadings, we have seen murders, we have heard reports of rape, and we have heard effectively of citizens being exterminated by ISIL. We are not prepared to stand by and let that happen. We have joined more than 40 other nations in this humanitarian effort, and we will continue to play our part. And at the same time, we want to make sure that ISIL, that is committing these acts of terror and these acts of barbarism, is degraded and that they are disrupted in that activity. We know that there are some links back here in Australia, that more than 60 Australians are overseas currently fighting overseas in this brutal war that is going on. But we have to make sure that those who are engaged in these acts are not able to return and not able to conduct these acts of terror on citizens at home.
OK, Nick, before I go to you, I want to go to the White House and Michelle Kaczynski, CNN reporter, standing by. Michelle, the President made a speech in Florida to troops seeking to clarify his position that he won't be sending soldiers into combat despite the evidence of the testimony yesterday by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Martin Dempsey.
And make sure that it was absolutely clear, because really over the last several days it has not been clear. We've also heard calls from outside analysts saying, well, there's going to have to be troops on the ground in some capacity. The White House has said repeatedly, well, they're not going to be U.S. troops. And the president spelled it out right now. They've been using the same phrases now: no combat role and no combat mission. So there will be U.S. troops there. We already know, I mean, there are more than 1,500 U.S. troops in Iraq right now. We also know that the U.S. used special forces inside Syria. But remember, that was a rescue mission. So what they want to say to the American public and to the world is to make it clear, no, U.S. troops will not be engaged in a combat role or a combat mission. That then brings up all of these questions about specific hypotheticals. Well, what if these troops are attacked as they're advising? Well, the White House still says, sure, they're going to fight back if they need to, but the goal of them being there is not going to be to directly and personally engage with the enemy. That's how they put it. And they're even clarifying what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs said yesterday. He said that there might be certain circumstances where he would feel it necessary to recommend to the president that ground troops be used. And he said that the president agreed that he would sort of rule on a case-by-case basis, that he would consider that. Well, the White House wanted to clear that up today, too. They said under no circumstances, I mean, some see that as boxing themselves in, would U.S. troops be used in a combat situation. They said what Dempsey was referring to would be U.S. troops that would be put in a forward deployment, so ready on the ground, but they would still, even in those contingencies, they would still be in this tactical advisory role, Kieran.
So, Michelle Kaczynski at the White House, thank you for that. Nick Champion, it seems a similar debate happening there as to here. Where do you draw the line and what's combat and what's not? It's complex, and it's going to be obviously a difficult thing to manage in a war zone, to say, OK, we've got troops there, but they're not involved in combat. You can't go out with those particular missions with the Peshmerga and the Iraq forces. It seems a difficult line to tread, Nick.
Well, look, I think the first principles are these. Firstly, it has to be a humanitarian mission. Secondly, it has to have the cooperation of the international coalition. And it has to be consistent with international law. And lastly, it has to be by agreement with the Iraqi government. Now, those three broad principles will guide Labor in its support for these actions. When you get down to specific, I guess, rules of engagement, they're best done by our military forces, and they're capable of doing those rules of engagement so that they're clear for all to see. So I think it's not that difficult to set out a strategy to meet those humanitarian goals, to prevent genocide, very serious criminal acts in the north of Iraq. We are quite capable of doing that, and I think the government's quite capable of doing it on our behalf.
Kelly O'Dwyer, your thoughts on that debate, which is happening in Washington. Of course, the Prime Minister's been asked for clarity on that as well, given our special forces, about 150 of them, are part of that deployment there.
Well, Nick is absolutely right, Kieran, and we stand together, the government and the opposition, on the engagement that is taking place. We have around about 600 personnel who are engaged in actions overseas right now. Now, that is to support a humanitarian effort that's at the request of the Iraqi government in order to support them in pushing back the ISIL forces that are committing these acts of terror and barbarism in their nation state. And we will be assisting them in that humanitarian effort. We will be assisting the international forces that are also engaged in that international effort. Nick is right in saying that the rules of engagement are best left to military personnel. They are the experts in this area. They will determine exactly what the military rules of engagement actually are, and we support them in the work that they're doing overseas right now on our behalf.
Kelly O'Dwyer and Nick Champion, thank you for that this morning. Obviously, we've been overwhelmed by our top story this morning, the counter-terrorism raids in Sydney and Brisbane. I do appreciate our chat abridged as it is this morning. I'll be joined by the Immigration Minister, Scott Morrison, after the break.